This is a dram of Outlander. This is Desiree, your podcaster and the blogger for adramofoutlander.com. For all things Outlander, from the Diana Gabaldon book series to the Stars TV series and everything in between. This is episode 9, Reckonings. So for non-readers, please stop and do not listen to this podcast until after the second half of the season is shown on Stars Network, because there will be serious spoilers for you, and if you don't want to know what's coming, really, please don't listen. So, Chapter 22, Reckonings, is about the aftermath of the rescue of Claire from Black Jack Randall. And I decided to do this podcast this week instead of waiting for the series to catch up on TV, because there was an article this week that called the punishment a spanking. Well, spanking infers a couple of things, and that puts Claire into a very childlike position under Jamie's authority. And that rings very hollow to me. The other aspect of spanking is that it could be construed as something titillating and sexual, those 50 Shades of Grey comparisons that have been made. And that, too, is totally not what this chapter is about. And so I felt very compelled to discuss the punishment and why it can be viewed as some sort of justice in this context specifically. So, when we think about where this scene takes place, it is just after Jamie rescues Claire from Black Jack Randall's office. And to remind as to why she ended up being captured by the Redcoats, it was actually Corporal Hawkins, that guy. Because she did not stay hidden when Jamie told her to. So Jamie and the men, including Dougal, are going on face value that Claire left the hiding place when they all went to go meet with Horrocks. And Jamie had told her it wasn't safe, there are redcoats around, and she needs to hide. And he left her alone, and she did not want to be left alone. She wanted to go with him. I mean, she had just killed someone recently after almost being raped, and Jamie couldn't help her. He was being held, so he couldn't do anything while he was watching this unfold. So she's coming off of this really traumatic event and getting married unexpectedly, and she has found herself going through many things in a very short amount of time. So we really know as readers why she left. But Jamie and the men do not know. His instructions were clearly for her safety and for their safety too. There are redcoats everywhere. Jamie's an outlaw. Pretty precarious situation. So Claire was captured by the Redcoats while attempting to reach Craignadoon. And this action put all the men in serious danger. At the time of the rescue and into the days following, as Randall would certainly have patrols out looking for them. And not just looking for them. He now knew where Jamie Fraser was, and that Jamie Fraser was Claire's new Scottish husband. that spells big trouble. I mean, Black Jack Randall is going to really take a personal vendetta and an unwavering search because he has a special desire for Jamie. And now Claire really, really is on his bad side. I mean, if it weren't bad enough before from their previous exchange and then their initial meeting and now this. I mean, this is in a very short time span. All of this is occurring. So now let's layer on top of that the gut-ripping view of Jamie having to witness Randall attacking Claire. I mean, when he's in the window, her skirts are up, Randall's pants are down, he has her at knife point, he has cut her bodice away. Again, this situation was right on the heels of Claire nearly being raped when she and Jamie were intimate, when they'd wandered away from the rest of the group. And Jamie was unable to protect her. So there's lots of different things going on here. That's a ball of string that keeps having more added to it. So as we step back and look at what's happened, there are, many, many layers of not only personal pain, harm, and hurt between Claire and Jamie, but to the group as a whole. Her community has been damaged inadvertently by her actions. And this damage needs to be forgiven and repaired. Justice really must be served. I mean, that's the time they're living in. You couldn't just say you're sorry and move forward, because these were really dire times. These were times where men walked around with swords and used them. Very different than 20th century or 21st century sensibilities would take us in our worlds. So all of this occurred, all of this damage, whether or not Claire intended it to, because she ignored his instruction and bolted for Craignadoon. Yes, I will say Claire was traumatized. She was angry at Jamie and didn't realize it for not protecting her. She was running away from this place back to what she knows. As in a previous podcast, I don't necessarily think she was running to Frank. She was running from this place right now. It became too much. And when she realized that Craignadoon was so close to her, she ran. And she did think of Jamie for a moment, about his heart. But she didn't think about the physical danger, the future danger, the precarious nature of what would happen if she was spotted or caught by the redcoats. So regardless of why she ran, she was reckless, she was thoughtless, and she was selfish to her own need and to her own emotion. And clearly she was scared being left by herself. Yes, that matters. But it doesn't change the outcome. And it doesn't change what Randall was doing to her and her having to be rescued. So after the rescue, the men would not speak to her. On the ride, she was being shunned by her community. These were her people for all intents and purposes. She had been brought into their fold. And she and Jamie had stopped and had it out together, yelling and screaming and arguing and saying terrible things. But they forgave each other. That's where Claire realized she was angry with him for not protecting her and her having to kill one of the deserters. Because they both would have been dead if she wouldn't have acted. And she was angry. He was supposed to protect her. It didn't matter if it was rational or not. And part of Jamie's anger in this situation was that he felt guilty for not protecting her. And then he thought maybe she did this on purpose to get back at him for not protecting her. Well, I think he knew that wasn't true, and she knew that wasn't true. But he really didn't know why she left in the first place. So even though they had forgiven each other, there still was the necessity to repair and heal the group, their small community of people that were traveling together, that were close-knit. There was some justice that had to be called for. And sometimes I'm sorry is not enough. So when they get back to the inn, and Dougal had to pay a hefty extra bit of silver to keep the innkeeper silent, Claire had no idea what was coming to her. She had no idea what Jamie had in mind. It never even dawned on her that there would be some sort of punishment for the outcome of her actions. And while they were eating dinner, none of the men would talk to her. And it was very uncomfortable. And she knew they were angry and didn't know what to do about it. So when they went to bed, and Jamie did not get fully undressed, she asked him why. And this is where he goes into the reasoning, because Jamie was the one expected to offer up the discipline as her husband. And it wasn't her being a child. It wasn't him being this authority figure as if she was supposed to be under his thumb. This is justice, like the boy in the pillory, but I'll get to that later, in the way of something had to happen to show the others that this was understood and it was now closed, and she somehow paid for her actions. And she was clearly sorry and regretful, but there was no way the group could forgive and move forward with just, I'm sorry. So Jamie starts to explain to her why. And I'm going to read some of the chapter, not all of it, but just here and there. And she says, "Come to bed, Jamie. What are you waiting for?" "Well, lass, I'm afraid we've a matter still to settle between us before we sleep tonight." "What is it?" He didn't answer at once. Deliberately not sitting down on the bed by me, he pulled up a stool and sat facing me instead. "Do you realize, Claire, that all of us came close to being killed this afternoon?" I looked down at the quilt, shamefaced. "Yes, I know. My fault. I'm sorry." "Aye, so you realize. Do you know that if a man among us had done such a thing, to put the rest in danger, he would have likely had his ears cropped or been flogged, if not killed outright?" I blanched at this. "No, I didn't know." "Well, I know, as you're not yet familiar with our ways, and it's some excuse. Still, I did tell you to stay hid, and had you done so, it would never have happened. Now the English will be looking high and low for us, and we shall have to lie hid during the days and travel at night now. And as for Captain Randall, aye, that's something else again. He'll be looking for you especially, you mean, now that he knows you're here?" He nodded absently. "Aye, it's personal with him, you know." "I'm so sorry, Jamie," I said. Jamie dismissed this with a wave of the hand. "If it were only me you'd hurt by it, I would not say more about it. Though since we're talkin'," he shot me a sharp glance, I'll tell you that it near killed me to see the animal with his hands on you." He looked off into the fire, grim-faced as though reliving the afternoon's events. Looking at that, he's leading up to reminding her what he said he would do if she left. And he explained to her what would have happened to a man had he caused this outcome, caused this injury and danger, the harm to the group. So a man would have had it far, far worse than Claire is going to be receiving. This is not about spanking. And this is not about beating, regardless of what Claire says. I mean, her point of view is sometimes a bit of hyperbole and grandiose, and she's remembering it as she's telling. But that's not what I see that happened. She was not beaten within an inch of her life. I smirk every time I see that. And I'm abjectly against spouses harming each other. So, as we look ahead now, he says we better get on with it. You've done considerable damage by crossing my orders, and I'm going to punish you for it, Claire. You'll recall what I told you when I left you this morning. I recalled all right, and I hastily flung myself across the bed so my back was pressed to the wall. What do you mean? You know quite well what I mean, he said firmly. Kneel down by the bed and lift your skirts, lass. And so here is where Claire is like, no way, no how are you doing this? He could make her do whatever he wanted. She clearly figured that out. And she says, I've said I'm sorry, and I am, and I'll never do such a thing again. And he said, that's the point. You might. And it's because you didn't take things as seriously as they are. You come from a place where things are easier, I think. 'Tis not a matter of life or death where you come from, to disobey orders or take matters into your own hands. At worst you might cause someone discomfort or be a bit of a nuisance, but it isn't likely to get someone killed. It's the hard truth that a light action can have very serious consequences in places and times like these, especially for a man like me. I knew you would never endanger me or anyone else on purpose, but you might easily do so without meaning it, like you did today, because you do not really believe me yet when I tell you that some things are dangerous. You're accustomed to think for yourself, and I know that you're not accustomed to letting a man tell you what to do, but you must learn to do so for all our sakes. So Claire agrees, but yet he still insists. And he says, now listen, you understand me. You say and I believe it, but there's a difference between understanding something with your mind and really knowing it deep down. And she nodded reluctantly. So yes, she clearly was regretful and sorry. But that wasn't enough. He wanted to know that she took him seriously. And the group needed to know that she took him seriously and understood. Because her actions had serious unintended consequences. And he says the other reason is because of the other men. You'll have noticed how they were tonight. There's such a thing as justice, Claire. You've done wrong to them all, and you'll have to suffer for it. I'm your husband. It's my duty to attend to it, and I mean to do it. She had strong objections. I have strong objections to some things like this. It blows my mind as somebody reading this in the 20th century the first time and rereading it several times in the 21st. But yet, I do understand it. And my sensibilities and hers would say no to such punishment. Different time, different dangers. Really, Claire got off easy. He could have flogged or killed her, as a man might receive for careless, endangering actions. Do I like this punishment? Of course I don't. But I understand it in the context of the time. What happened to the group because of it, and Jamie having no knowledge as to why she ran. He was angry. He was hurt, as she was. Though they forgave, there was still a gap. And he's 23, and he's doing what he really believes is right. She has to have some sort of suffering. And what, he was going to, like, shackle her to post outside for 24 hours? Well, number one, they didn't have that luxury. They had to hide now. But something had to happen. Like, no sheriff was going to take care of it. So I look at this as something minor, really, in comparison to some of the events that happen later in the book, that truly caused me to feel ill and caused me such physical and emotional pain. This is a bit of a stunner when you first read it, but if you actually step back, you might see it differently. And one thing I wanted to talk about was Jamie saying he would enjoy it. But my interpretation is that he was taking satisfaction in the justice of it and rendering that justice, doing his job. I don't believe he was being sexually turned on, as some people infer, or that he was happy about strapping his wife. He didn't want to hurt her or cause her pain. And he wasn't punching her. It was her behind. This is not abuse. This is not a sexual act. It's a very specific suffering and justice for the situation that occurred. I'm not sure what else he could have done to appease the group and to help with those reparations. I don't know if she could have done anything for them to trust her if something hadn't occurred in the form of punishment. Jamie was taking his job as her husband very seriously. His sense of justice runs really deep. I mean, when he took the beating for Leary, so she wouldn't be shamed in her whole community, she was supposed to be strapped for disobeying her father. But this would have been in a totally public forum for a 16-year-old girl. Yes, who was considered a young adult at the time and totally marrying age. But he didn't say she didn't deserve to be disciplined. He took the punishment for her actions. Justice was served in his mind. And the boy at the pillory, like I kind of spoke about just, a little bit ago, he didn't say the boy should not have been punished or spent time in front of his community at the pillory. He did help release the fearful boy. So much time had gone by, and the boy had paid for what he did. But he didn't think the boy never should have been punished. So even though he believed in the justice part of it, he also showed mercy, really great mercy, and we will see that in his actions throughout the books. These are themes that run deep: justice and mercy. Retribution is different than justice. So, I'm not going to go there right now. And then think ahead to the stories he tells Claire about himself being disciplined and getting strapped. And he doesn't speak of it with anger or with bitterness. He speaks of it as he got what he deserved, and it made him think before doing something the next time. And that upbringing and that core belief and understanding, I think, really comes to play in, quote, what he chose to dole out as punishment to Claire. That's how he viewed it. He didn't view it as, oh, I get to beat my wife today. It wasn't a joyful act. So, and at the end of all of this, he promises never to raise a hand to her again. Like that. Like he will never strap her again. So this also shows an element, peeks into his ability to see things new and change within himself. He is very emotionally aware, he's very intelligent, and he does alter behavior when he sees that he needs to change something. So, looking at Claire in this situation, yes, she was angry and she was sore and she wouldn't let him sleep in bed with her. Well, he chose to sleep on the floor the first night, and then the second night she didn't let him sleep, or afternoon, sleep in bed with her. But Claire went back and forth internally about being angry and understanding and making sense of it, and being angry and understanding, and going over and over and over in her head the words he had said, what had happened. And even in her anger and her being hurt and embarrassed, probably, that she had the clarity that he may have been right. That it made some sense. There was justice in it. Though she never wanted him to do it again and made him promise not to, that she still made sense of it. And she wasn't really eternally angry at him and unforgiving. She'd also, excuse me, understood that she had not taken seriously the clear and present dangers around her. 20th century Claire pops in. That's who she is. Very different time. You know, in the 21st century, where I live in the United States of America, I can pretty much go anywhere, anytime, day or night, unescorted, and I'm going to be safe. That is a really big deal. It does not like that everywhere still to this day. And so when I go places that are different, I have to be mindful and remember that it's not what I know. And sometimes I fail at recognizing that. And it's the same time frame I'm in, it's just a different location. So it's not a character flaw of hers, it's more of she hasn't been in this place very long, and it's still really difficult to wrap her brain around how things work and what things really are like. And she says that she's kind of in this bubble with Jamie. True, she is. And the next day, when she went down for breakfast. And Jamie said that they would be very gentle with her. They might chide her a little, but that was okay. They were very respectful, the men. They openly received her back into the fold. That is amazing. It was an instant change from the night before. They knew she was embarrassed. They knew she was hurt. They knew she fought because they could hear her while she screamed and wailed. And they all took turns chiding her a little bit and patting her on the rump throughout the day before they went to rest, before their evening ride was to come. But they treated her as if she belonged with them. They were okay now with her. There was no animosity. All was well in their community. That speaks some volumes. I mean, justice is very different today in the part of the world I live in. You can't imagine that being anything reasonable. But I can envision a time where it could be reasonable. And I'm not one who believes in use of physical punishment. Not as a whole. So, the other part of the men accepting her back into the fold that I really think is kind of sweet is that Claire recognizes during the ride that the men are being very gallant, and frequently somebody is stopping to get a drink. Somebody's stopping to relieve himself. You know, they're finding reasons every so often to let her stop and stretch and rub her sore behind. And what a beautiful thing. I mean, they're not only just accepting her back in, they are giving her mercy, knowing what she's experiencing. I think that's really quite lovely as an outcome for all of this. So, was justice served? Was it okay that he did this? In the context, I don't have an issue with it. For this situation, I don't have an issue with it. And also having the knowledge of what is to come, and when he does gain understanding as to why she left, his response to that, wow, I can't wait till we get there. That'll be a different podcast all by itself. So, what do you think about this? I mean, I am a 21st century feminist that came out of being a 20th century feminist. I came from a feminist mother. I am growing feminist sons and have a feminist husband. I mean, the idea that my husband would do this, one of us wouldn't come out alive, and it would, you know, I'd be living, is what I think in my head. But I can see there needing to be retribution of some sort. If I did something, whether it was on purpose or not, to cause really serious consequences immediately to my relationship and my spouse, as well as to my community, something would have to happen. I mean, I don't know what that would look like, but something would have to give, so that I would give something of myself and suffer along with them, so they would accept me back. And I would have righted it as much as I could. So, if you want to hear more of my podcasts, you can find them on iTunes and on the website, adramofoutlander.com, along with the written blog. There are hundreds of posts on there from the TV series, and now I'm writing things more about the book that the series is in hiatus. You can also find me on Facebook, a Dram of Outlander page, on Twitter, Dram of Outlander, and Instagram, a Dram of Outlander blog. So, until next time, Slán Java!